I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth.
On April 6, 1942, the world got a little brighter. Milwaukee, specifically, and then the world. Because an angel in human form came and shared his gifts and his kindness and his menschlichkeit. And that individual became a union with another generous, beautiful soul, and wove a fabric of family and love and inspiration. And today, as all of you, and I know the countless others who are joining us online, gather here, it's to pay testimony and witness to a beautiful soul. To Larry, who we honor with our deep presence, our physical space today. It is because of all of you, it is because of this beautiful family that you stand here and dwell in testimony and witness to the Spirit that has dwelled with us for 81 years. Today we will hear beautiful words of inspiration, of memory, of laughter. A funeral isn't all about the memorial and the sadness. It's about how do we hold a person in their true substance. In fact, the word kavod in our tradition is respect and honor, but it's related to the word kibed in our tradition, which means weightiness. How is the weightiness and substance of the relationship given to us in order for us to respect it? We will hear some of that this morning. When we chant the words that we just heard, the beautiful words by Rabbi Bernstein, the words are, I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where does my help come from? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. Very challenging words when people have had to endure pain. As we know, Larry has had some health challenges in this most recent time. But in truth, I believe that the dwelling of the divine is in the texts and in the phone calls and in the embrace and in the warmth which surrounds both Andy and Larry throughout this time and their family and beyond. The SINI is the possibility of what makes community whole. It is the possibility that we are given to bring breadth and depth and relationship into oneness with one another. And so those are the words that we hold on to as we heard them chanted so beautifully, and also the memories that we will hear this morning as we prepare to lay Larry to his final resting place. In the words of Ecclesiastes, we learn that a season is set for everything, a time for every experience that is under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. And we know that a period of mourning is complicated, filled with emotions and memories that are both bitter and sweet. And so we begin our service this morning with the recitation of psalms and prayers that link Larry's life to an almost 4,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. The words on your pamphlets this morning, Psalm 23. We'll share them in Hebrew, then I'll invite you to share them along as we read them together in English. Mizmor LaDavid Adonai Roy Lo Sar, Bino Desher Batseni, Alme Minerchot Yenachaleni, Yavshir Shovvev Yanchenik Bragnet Tzedek L'man Shemo, Gam Ki Alech B'Gates Al Mavet Lo Yira Ra Ki Atam Adi, Shivtecha Meshatecha Achema Yanachamuni, Taroch Lefanai Shulchan Neged Sorai Deshanta V'Shemen Roshi, Kosi Revaya, Ach Tov V'Chesed Yadafuni Kol Yemei Chayai V'Shavti V'Veit Adonai Le'Orech Yamim. We join together. Eternal God, you are my shepherd. I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in paths of righteousness for the sake of your name. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff, you comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Eating those words, we also think of other words that give us comfort and solace. As I had the privilege and honor of seeing Larry several times in these past weeks, Larry made no secret about his wishes. If you know Larry, he knew what he wanted, and this is what he wanted. And he also chose a beautiful reading that came out of an old machzor, an old High Holy Day prayer book we used to use called The Gates of Repentance. And his daughter Melissa is going to share those beautiful words at this time.
If some messenger were to come to us with the offer that death shall be overthrown, but with the one inseparable condition that birth should also cease, if the existing generation were given the chance to live forever, but on the clear understanding that never again would there be a child or a youth or a first love, never again new persons with new hopes, new ideas, new achievements, ourselves for always and never any others. Could the answer be in doubt? We shall not fear the summons of death. We shall remember those who have gone before us and those who will come after us. Alas, for those who cannot sing but die with all the music in them, let us treasure the time we have and resolve to use it well, counting each moment precious, a chance to apprehend some truth, to experience some beauty, to conquer some evil, to relive some suffering, to love and be loved, to achieve something of lasting worth. Help us, then, to fulfill the promise that is in each of us, and so to conduct ourselves that generations hence it will be true to say of us, the world is better because for a brief space they lived in it.
In a moment, we're going to have a few speakers that are going to share some beautiful images and memories that we can take with us as we leave this sacred space. Our first speaker will be Larry's stepdaughter, Liz, and followed by a close friend, Larry Sherman.
Lawrence Albert Oster has many names. Lawrence, Larry, Lair, Papa Larry, even Papa Ouija. Larry was my stepdad for over 35 years. But he wasn't just my stepdad, he was my dad. I am so lucky to have grown up and been parented by Larry, who supported me emotionally, physically, financially, and professionally. To be honest, it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows with me and Larry. Initially, we got off to a rocky start. When Larry came on the scene, I was 13 years old and been living in a house with only my mom and sister for the previous 5 years. It was a completely new experience having a boy in the house. I definitely couldn't walk around the house naked anymore. I think I may have rebelled a little bit. I may have acted like an entitled teenager. However, it didn't take long for Larry to win me over. It wasn't just how sweet and kind he was to my mom or his love of movies that we shared. It was what happened on September 19th, 1990. It was on the day, my 16th and a half birthday, that I found a present sitting on my bed. It was a new VCR and the Pretty Woman VHS tape. I was a diehard Pretty Woman fan and probably watched that movie 100 times thanks to Larry. After that, the half-birthday gift became a tradition. Even if it was simply a check with a handwritten half-birthday wish on San Diego scale company stationery, or even a piece of yellow legal pad with a quick Elizabeth, happy half-birthday, love Larry, written in his almost illegible handwriting. Larry never forgot my half-birthday. While it was originally a way to win me over, it became a special thing between the two of us that became a tradition in the Brown household as well. Before marrying my mom, Larry was a 45-year-old bachelor with no kids, or as I like to say, excess baggage. He was never around newborns, babies, toddlers, or even teenage boys. But in December 2004, when Seth and I announced that we were having a baby boy, Larry wholeheartedly reported for grandpa duty. One day, a mysterious box arrived from Neiman Marcus. In the box was a mini blue BMW ride-on car with an orange seat. There was no card, but it didn't take us long to figure out who sent it: Larry. To Larry, family was everything. When Seth, Mark, Max, and I moved to San Diego over 11 years ago, we came not simply for the lifestyle and the weather, although you wouldn't know that these days, but to be close to family. We wanted Mark and Max to get to spend quality time with their 4 grandparents. And recently, we were so lucky to add one more grandparent to our San Diego family when my father-in-law, Alan Rock, moved to San Diego in March of 2022. Alan was not only a blessing to the Brown family, but also to Larry and my mom. While Alan and Larry had bonded over the last 20 years at family events, Larry embraced Alan as a new friend, meeting every other Monday for lunch. Their close friendship meant so much to Larry, but also solidified my opinion of what a mensch Larry was. And speaking of lunches, I can't talk about Larry without talking about his love of food. Whether it was dining in the finest restaurants in the world, to over-ordering sushi from Sushi Oda and barbecue from Phil's, to his love of lowbrow cuisine like Lido Pizza in Lemon Grove, which I don't recommend, or Velveeta on toast when he was sick. It's true. Larry raised food to an Olympic sport level. At my business school graduation, we had a celebratory dinner at the Brazilian steakhouse Fogo de Chao. If you've ever been there, you know that they use a double-sided disc to indicate if you want more food or if you're taking a break. Green for more, red for pause. The restaurant is all you can eat, 14 meat varieties, sides, and a salad bar. Oddly enough, Larry's disc kept disappearing. We could only assume that management realized that Larry was unstoppable and they weren't going to make any money on him. So they confiscated his disc multiple times in an attempt to cut him off. We have enjoyed laughing about that night for years. I think Larry's love of food was a direct result of his passion for travel. Over the years, I had stories about his trip around the world. He loved the experience of planning and travel and wanted to experience it with my mom. He often gave my mom trips as birthday, Hanukkah, anniversary, or Mother's Day presents. And it wasn't just my mom that Larry spoiled with trips. He took Melissa and me. I got the me right. I just want you to know. On some amazing vacations. When I was in high school, we traveled to Spain, and when Melissa was studying abroad, we went back to Spain and Morocco. Years later, Turkey and London. Finally, Palm Desert, Cancun, and Washington, D.C. with the 4 grandkids. On my junior year abroad in Paris, Larry and my mom visited me in the fall. And that spring, Larry returned by himself for a Larry and Liz trip. It made me feel very special that he wanted to see me in Paris to meet my friends and, of course, enjoy a couple of nice meals. Although our international trips were outstanding, some of my favorite memories were trips close to home. The entire family went to Palm Desert, where we went bowling, watched movies, and hung out in the pool. Larry loved throwing his grandsons around in the pool, and so did they. I will always remember when we went to D.C. with all the grandsons. We took a double-decker bus tour of D.C. at night, but it was pouring. So while the 9 of us were standing outside getting soaked in the rain touring the Lincoln Memorial, Larry stayed on the bus. He may have actually taken a cab home. In fact, he didn't even make it into some of the family pictures. And finally, even though I wasn't on this trip, I've heard enough stories to feel like I was. In 2010, Larry took Seth and Mark on a once-in-a-lifetime guys trip to Tikchik Narrows in Alaska on a fishing trip. What could be better than fly fishing in the middle of the wilderness surrounded by wildlife and a plethora of salmon? It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that Larry had meticulously planned another incredible bucket list trip to Milan, Lake Como, Warsaw, Krakow, Vienna, London, and New York. Unfortunately, they were supposed to be on that trip right now. I find it amazing, not how cultured and well-traveled Larry was, but that he was able to plan all those trips on his own. You see, my mom and Larry were very slow to adopt new technologies. They are Luddites. Larry even had one of those Palm Pilot flip phones until about 2010. In fact, I think Seth helped him purchase multiple replacements off of eBay when they were no longer being sold in stores. And even more outdated than the Palm Pilot was the 27-inch box TV that my mom and Larry had in their family room in a cabinet until about 2014. When they finally replaced that TV with a flat screen, Larry, who loved anything in excess, overcompensated and purchased an 80-inch flat screen TV. When friends visited, I think there might have been a little bit of TV envy. Honestly, there are a million stories I could tell you about Larry. Narrowing them down for today proved to be extremely difficult. I didn't want to leave anything out. After much thought and deliberation, I decided that these are the things about Larry that I want to leave you with. He loved MASH and could watch reruns repeatedly. And as a teenager, that wasn't a lot of fun. His favorite breakfast spot was Larry's in La Jolla, and for one day on his 65th birthday, did I say it wrong? I said it wrong. His favorite breakfast spot was Harry's in La Jolla, and for one day on his 65th birthday, it became Larry's. His 3 favorite flavors were salt, fat, and vodka. I'm not sure of the order. He never answered a question with a simple answer. If you asked a question, you needed to be prepared for a long-winded intellectual response. Larry did not have any hobbies. However, you could often find him playing solitaire on his phone or computer, many times until 4 in the morning. Again, he loved excess. He was passionate about travel, food, and culture. He was a night owl, often going to bed at 4 a.m., waking up at 1 in the afternoon, and not getting out of bed until 4 p.m. Larry loved paper towels, but not in the way that you typically expect, as the quicker picker-upper for spills in the kitchen. He loved them for how he could use them as a bib by folding multiple paper towels on top of one another on his belly while eating a turkey leg on the couch. Larry loved being invited to events and parties, even though he did not want to attend those activities, and my mom often had to go solo. Larry loved his book club so much that he changed travel plans so that he did not miss a session. Larry was brilliant. He graduated with an undergrad business degree from Wharton at Penn, an MBA from Columbia, and a PhD in finance, pronounced finance, from Syracuse. Larry was fiercely loyal and embodied the term family man. Larry was a pillar of the community. He was president of Jewish Family Service, on the board of Congregation Beth Israel, and a devoted member and president of Big Brothers. In fact, when he agreed to be a big brother to Gil, the contract was for 18 months. I mentioned Larry's excess. He was Gil's big brother for 9 years, and even Gil was at my mom and Larry's intimate 16-person wedding. He treated Melissa and me as if we were his daughters. He loved my mom wholeheartedly and treated her like a queen. He was a loving husband, friend, dad, uncle, brother, and grandfather. Larry ate, traveled, purchased TVs, and used paper towels in excess. But most importantly, he loved in excess. I love him immensely and will miss him dearly.
Good morning. First thing you have to know is not to follow Elizabeth when talking about Larry. All of this is just another version of what Liz said. I could fill in some details, but probably not too vital. I knew Larry since 1984, when I first met Andy. He was affectionately known as the Oster or the Osterizer, anything that fit. We had lunch every Saturday for the last 15 years. When we were in town together, when we weren't otherwise occupied with grandchildren or other life cycle events. As has been indicated, we couldn't make a decision as to where to have lunch until 11:30 on Saturday morning, when His Highness awoke from his slumbers. He was very big into beauty rest. As Liz referred to, he had an Ivy League education following in his family's footsteps, and he even went on to teach at Baruch College and at St. Cloud in Minnesota. But academia really didn't appeal to him. He traded it in for the real world and moved to the big city, New York, to work in the financial departments of major retailers in New York, involved with capital budgets and planning, where he could use his PhD in finance. Is that what you called it? But then, again, following family tradition, he wanted to become a small business owner. So he explored moving back to Milwaukee. I don't think any of us would want to go back there. He thought about the Sun Belt, which to him was Miami or Phoenix or someplace like that. One was too glitzy, one was too hot. So fortunately for us, he came to San Diego in 1981. He bought a small business called San Diego Scales, way down someplace below the city limits. In all these years, I have never been there. I heard it described as a Quonset hut. I just didn't know. And he settled into this new, quieter life, other than what he had in New York. As indicated, his quieter life included getting up at 11:30 or thereabouts so he can go to Harry's and read the newspapers for 2 hours. He strolled to work, into work about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and like I said, a much quieter life. But he still brought style to this quieter life. Notwithstanding the fact that this business was small, he still dressed like an investment banker with blue shirts with white collars and white sleeves and very fancy cufflinks. It was only when he unsuccessfully fought the Battle of the Bulge that he gave into his chinos and plaid shirt or Ralph Lauren polo, which became his signature outfit. Argyle socks topped everything off. He met Andy, you've heard all about that. He had a built-in family, so didn't have to go through all of the effort, all of the aggravation that most of us had. And it was and as Liz said, he was 45 when he got married, so he was the perfect husband. He knew how to cook. Andy did not have to make dinner for him. He did everything for himself and was otherwise able to look after himself. As was also said by Liz, he had a different experience than I knew growing up as a kid. He traveled the world. Literally, I think it was for a year after he graduated and went to very exciting and exotic places in the world, which Andy became very accustomed to. But for the pandemic, they used to go to all the time. The other thing that he started the custom is to go to New York for a month and live like a New Yorker. And he planned it like a military operation. He had to make all of the, and he would never use a travel agent, that was not permitted, but he would book all these restaurants. He would arrange for operas and for Broadway shows and for ballets especially. And to him, there was nothing better than to do one of those things when it was well reviewed by the New York Times. A very famous quote for Larry. Of course, though, his passion for beauty rest also extended to New York. And Andy would go out and do her thing, meet her friends, and do them at 11:30 or so. He would awake and meet her for their various daily activities. His night did not end until a nightcap at a local bar near where they were staying. This became, I don't think Andy went with that. Another part of his life that he enjoyed. Larry was really a role model in so many ways, but mostly for unhealthy living. He had a standard against which all of us could measure ourselves, and he was always feel better about it. I may not have exercised a lot, but I sure exercised more than Larry. I may have drunk too much, but never as much as Larry. He was the perfect friend. He confidently assured all of us that his lifespan would be a mere 18 months shorter than ours. So why should he worry about his unhealthy diet and lack of exercise? He often told me that there was no danger of him ever incurring a sports injury, because the most athletic thing he did was stand in the shower. He became a legend in San Diego for his ability to eat and drink to excess. And then, either Andy finally prevailed, or real life set in. Larry went cold turkey and abandoned rich foods and alcohol. The tradition of the pot calling the kettle black, he then accused me of drinking too much. And I had been known to aggravate Barbara by having a second glass of wine every now and then. Compared to Larry, I was a teetotaler. Now, I think most of you know Larry was not a very religious or observant Jew. The only Bible in his life was the New York Times. He did enjoy going to temple in New York, though, especially on Yom Kippur, while on their travels. But I really think that was because the choir at the Park Avenue Synagogue was as good as the performance at the Met. The irony of it all is that his grandfather founded the first Reformed temple in Milwaukee. Then his father founded the third Reformed temple in Milwaukee. I never did find out what happened to the second or why they had a need for so many. I recently found out, even though he didn't show his feelings by his actions and go to temple, he thought that the temple was the best and most important way to maintain and sustain life in our community. Surprising revelation. He was involved with JFS and other Jewish organizations in town. That became his passion. And one of the things that I give him credit for was moving the cause program along, which currently provides hundreds of thousands of dollars to JFS every year. It was quite an accomplishment. Now, I have to admit there were some that found Larry a challenge to deal with. He had strong opinions, and he was certainly not bashful about expressing them. He had political views and a stubbornness about certain things which most people didn't find easy to deal with. And he loved playing the role of the curmudgeon. He would always have reasons to be naughty about something. What he especially loved doing was baiting our Republican friends. He always found something to just stick the blade in a little bit. But this was really based on his genuine, lifelong commitment, I found, and compassion for social fairness, both here and in Israel. I think most of you know that Larry was intensely private about his personal affairs and his health. He did not like to discuss medical issues at all. Finally, quite recently, at one of our lunches, when these medical issues got really tough and scary, he told me about them, but only on the very express condition that I could not tell anybody else, anyone, included Barbara or anyone else. He threatened to haunt me if I broke that confidence. I wasn't surprised when I heard a week later his doc called and told him to pack a bag and get over to the hospital as soon as possible. They wanted to deal with, investigate the several strokes that the MRIs of his brain had revealed. Sadly, he spent the weekend there, and 2 days later, they sent him home to consider further medical options. While he was at home, he had another stroke. This one was a big one. It left him unable to speak without great difficulty, or to write, or to perform other small motor skills. We also discovered that he had the starting phase of lung cancer. But still having a penchant for privacy, he and Andy wanted to keep his condition close to the vest, telling no one, not even their closest friends. When his condition stabilized, Larry was moved to an acute stroke rehab center at Sharp. At this point, he contemplated what lied ahead for him, the not so likely success of treatment as well as the stress and hardship imposed on Andy and the rest of the family. He decided this was not a battle that he wanted to continue to fight. His assessment, it just wasn't going to work. When I visited him in the rehab center, I heard about this decision. Even though it was sad, I admired him for his courage to make this decision, especially when everyone around him was telling him not to do it. But as the rabbi said, when he made up his mind, he made up his mind. I could see he was very, very comfortable with this decision. He looked at ease. He had a smile on his face. There was no second thoughts in his mind. And even though Andy wanted more time to say goodbye to him, she also understood this is what he wanted, and she came to accept it. He was then sent home with hospice care to keep him comfortable. During that time, Andy says they talked and talked the days and the nights and were never closer. He died in her arms a week later. It's going to be very lonely lunchtime this Saturday and every Saturday thereafter. But I know I'll be thinking of Larry and everything he meant to me, and the memories of him will fill my heart. I will be grateful for his friendship and the laughter and the joys he brought to my life. And as a parting gift, he made sure that I would never forget that. He died on my birthday, so every year when I think of that, I will again remember Larry.
As we take some time this morning to reflect on Larry's life and his legacy, I can't help but think about the time in which we're living today in our Jewish calendar, a time that speaks of counting, of census. Our sacred scroll nourishes us with narratives of identifying the ways in which each person is counted, how our skills, how our uniqueness contribute to the whole. What a powerful and sacred time to be mindful of how those who we've shared life with, those friends that we cared for and cared for us in return, nourish us and one another with their gifts and their uniqueness. Souls like Larry, which we recall in this moment, bring to mind the essence of this time, one that we honor for the elements of his life that we recall today. To his family, his loving wife, Andy, to his stepchildren, Melissa, Mark, to Liz, and to Seth, to his 4 grandsons, Mark, Benjamin, Max, Ethan, to his sister Susan, and her husband Jack, and 5 nieces and nephews. We join you in honoring Larry's life this morning. And knowing Larry, as many have been granted this blessing, it would do injustice to just speak of sorrow today, as we know we just heard these incredible moments and memories that were shared, with the hope that each person that's here or online will allow a piece of Larry to enter into your own hearts. As I mentioned at the beginning, April 6, 1942, the world got a little brighter. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, his parents of German Jewish descent, pure assimilus, born and raised that way, as many German Jews of that generation chose. But still, Larry knew that for some reason, knowing that the temple was important to him, noting that without a synagogue, you don't have Jewish community. While never a fan of school in his younger years, as I've come to learn, Larry wanted to go to private school, and there his learning was animated and inspired by a couple of his teachers, and eventually it motivated him enough to matriculate at Penn. And from Penn to Columbia, as we heard, and pursuing his MBA and teaching finance at St. Cloud in Minnesota. And loving traveling and traveling around the world, as we have heard so beautifully, before going back to Syracuse for his PhD. He moved back to New York, and by the way, the dress takes a while to get used to once you move from New York to San Diego. He moved back to New York working for different companies in their finance departments. In 1980, he started looking for a place where he could buy a business. And before long, he found his new home in San Diego, as we learn, where he purchased San Diego Scale Company. In 1984, a friend of Andy's, Bobby Susselman, had been to a mixer and called Andy, I believe it was 1 a.m. in the morning, to say that she met Andy's future husband. Andy and Larry were introduced, but first they became friends, before eventually they started to date. And they dated for around 2 years, and they found their way to the chuppah in 1987. They got married in their living room, in the place where they've made their home for the past 35 and a half years. And let us not forget their vows to one another. Andy must keep her hair blonde. And Larry must never, ever retire because he had no hobbies. I had the privilege of hearing some beautiful memories of Larry from family members, and some thoughts stuck with me. Larry was a reader and an eater, determined and smart. Before Andy, Melissa, and Liz, aside from his parents and sister Susan, he never lived with anyone, especially 3 women, 2 of who were teenage young women. So there was an adjustment, and a new arrangement was to be had. Melissa and Liz recall favorite memories of traveling with Larry to London, to Spain, DC, and Mexico, and his support and attention to them personally and professionally was unwavering. He was a great person to vision the future, helping with applications and essays to college. He always treated Mom, as they noted, so well and with such love. He was nice, generous, and inclusive, wanting to have deep conversations and to always learn about work and to family. Larry was very excited to be a grandfather, though I learned that he wasn't exactly a play-on-the-ground papa. He engaged his grandchildren, from basketball games, trips to Dunkin' Donuts, and flat tires at the Hollywood sign in Los Angeles. He would create memorable experiences with them. While Larry held, let's say, interesting sleep habits, it didn't stop him from waking up and seeing his family off as they headed back east. And as the foodie he was, I was told that you haven't had dim sum or sushi unless he ordered it for you. Above all, Larry was intellectual, particular, long-winded, in a good way, excess, inventoried, respected, and boy, did he have convictions. He knew what he wanted. He was a creature of habit and always did the right and honorable thing. I had the privilege to visit with Larry these last weeks before his passing. Everything you see and experienced this morning and today, Larry had a say in, just as he did with his choice to pass on his own terms. Ethically, dignified, naturally, Jewishly, on his terms. And I know that these memories only begin to scratch the surface of Larry's life and his memory. And while this time of mourning is filled with so many emotions and memories, may we know that his actions and his love continue to serve as sources of memory for all of us. So may our memories of Larry, however we may hold them in our hearts, be a source of comfort to us all. In our tradition, we say the words, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory ever abide and be for blessing, as we say together, Amen. I invite you to just take a few moments for your own silent prayer. Yaseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. As we prepare to recite and chant the words of El Maleh, prior to that, I just would like to make a few announcements on behalf of the family. As the conclusion of this service this morning, we will ask the immediate family to make their way to their transports so that we can move expeditiously to interment at El Camino. Those who wish to join us can follow, and we will be concluding our service this morning with interment at El Camino. The family has also requested that if you are so inclined to make donations in loving memory to Larry, that they've invited you to do so to the Habenstock Navarez Fund to Combat Anti-Semitism here at Beth Israel, of which I know was a passion, and they invite you to do so. And as well, there will be, as we are beginning our Yontif Day of Shavuot, we technically cease a Shiva space, but the family will be receiving individuals that on Saturday evening from 6:30 to 9, and on Sunday from 6:30 to 9 p.m. at Andy's home at 1935 Hypatia Way in La Jolla. As well, there will be a service led by Rabbi Bernstein at 6:30 on Saturday, and I will be leading at 6:30 on Sunday evening, and we invite you to come and join us as well. I would ask you to please rise at this time.
El mele rachamim, shochen b'mromim, hametzei menucha nechona, tachat kanvei hashchina, im kiroshim utorim, kezor harakia, et nishmat Lazarus shelach leolamo began Eden tehei menuchato anabal harachamim yastirehu b'siter knafav leolamim vitzror achayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachlato, ve'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar Amen.
We join together on your pamphlets. God filled with mercy, who dwells on high, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence, amid the ranks of the holy and pure, to Larry, who has entered eternity. The Garden of Eden will be his resting place. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter him beneath your wings eternally, and bind his soul in the bond of everlasting life. Eternal God, you are his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. I will list the pallbearers. And if we can have the pallbearers, Larry Sherman, Rod Stone, Alan Rock, Seth Brown, Mark Brown, Max Brown, Benjamin Gran, and Ethan Gran to accompany the casket.